everybody, this is Patrick from Sasquatch in the Wild. This is a continuation video from Wednesday. When I got back, after seeing the little footprints and looking for the little juvenile Sasquatch, the little kid, he was only about 2 to 3 feet tall at best. I came back and I was telling Jim about it, and Mike and Trenton and Zach and whoever else started funneling out of that tent of theirs. And we had breakfast. We all kind of sat around and talked for a little bit about what people heard and experienced. And I said, well, I'm going to grab my camera and I'm going to go and go on the hike. And I'd say I'm going to go down this road. I'm going to go look for where Mike saw eye shine and see if there's any evidence. And Dave Odke's grandson said, hey, can I come along? I said, sure. So we went hiking down. Eventually we get to a split in the road where it goes one direction and it goes straight. And so we went straight and we found 2 hidden campsites. And I was like, oh, this is cool. And so I was kind of taking a mental note, kind of photographed where these are at. And there's a trailhead that splits off of that. And so we started walking down that trailhead. And I found there's weird tree breaks that looked like they were snapped and maybe twisted. There was a big honking limb that looked like someone had been cutting on it with a chainsaw. But this limb was like 3 or 4 branches stuck into the ground. And that's how it was. It was like this weird, it was all stuck into the ground. And the main body of the tree log, or whatever you want to call it, was sticking up. And there's scattered limbs on the thing. There's a lot of limbs missing, but I thought it was very bizarre to see something like that. So I kept walking down through, or we both were walking down, and we were taking random photographs and talking about whatever. And we get to a point where the trail splits into 3. So one part of the trail goes up, and there's an ATV trail this way. There's a trail that goes this way, and then there's a trail that goes down into a valley. Now, I figured the ATV trail probably matched up to another ATV trail that I had seen the day before. So I said, let's go down this way. He said, okay. So we started walking down, and we started to find these weird-looking, well, they almost looked like piles of branches, but they were kind of designed in a certain way. And I was like, God, that's weird. And I thought maybe they were a hunting blind for a hunter. But I've never known of a hunter that's going to sit on the ground and try to get into a position to shoot. And I was like, I wonder what these things are like on the inside, because these are right on the edge of a finger. If you don't know what a finger is, imagine if you look at your hand and you're walking down, say that this is a landmass and you're walking down it. If you go down in between your fingers, that's a ravine. So in between each finger is a ravine, all right? So looking down, I could see deer. And so I decided I wanted to get into one of these things. And I crawled in and I sat there. And Dave Odke's grandson just sat outside, because kind of thinking, you're really going to do that? And I went, yeah, I want to see what this is like. And it was, even though it looked small from the outside, it was roomy. It was crazy roomy. There like lots of headroom, a lot of, place for you to, like, if I laid down, my head did not touch the end of this. My feet were touching one end. I could not touch the other. There was at least a 2 or 3 foot stretch before my head would have hit the end. So I would have to be 3 foot taller than I am. So that put me at about 9 feet in length. And when I sat up, there was still space up here too. So I was like, this is weird. But when I looked down into the ravine, I could see the deer. So I was going, and I was doing these whistles, and these deer, the ears were like, they were hearing me, and they were looking around, trying to figure out where I was, and they couldn't determine where I was. And I was like, how an interesting way of hunting deer if this is what you're doing. So I get out and I decide I want to go down to that ravine. So I go down in there and I asked him, can you see me? And he goes, oh yeah, I can see you just fine. But when I looked back up to see where he was, I couldn't see him at all. And that hunting blind blended so well, technically it looked invisible. You couldn't tell that it was there. And it was strange. And most of that hunting blind was bleached out wood. And that should have stood right out. And I couldn't see it. I was like, this is strange. So I came back out. We walked further on down, I found a rock sitting on this little thing of grass, and I moved that, and it looked like a footprint. And I was like, well, that's misleading, isn't it? Because you see things, and you should actually know if that's real or not. And I think I'll throw that picture in there. But there used to be a rock where this thing is, and my foot's next to this grass. So as we were walking on, we come across this branch, and it goes out about 6 feet, and it snapped, and it goes back down. And I was like, that's weird. And so the tree branch was like about this big around, and I got on one side. I filmed it this way, and I walked around it, and I got close and looked at it and took another picture, and I backed up as he was walking up to it. This branch was just a hair taller than he was as he was walking next to it, and I took the photograph because I wanted to have a comparison shot about how tall this thing was compared to him. And I think he was about 6 foot. And I was like, well, that's interesting. And this branch, if this was a snow load break, I'm baffled on how that would have actually snapped the way it did. Because honestly, it looks like something was bracing it from one spot, and someone snapped it, or something snapped it to cause it to go down. And I was like, that's kind of weird. So we walked around from that, and we got to the point, or the end of the finger. And from there, you could look down into the valley, you could look down up to the valley, and you could look across. And I saw this rock formation that probably the length of maybe 1 or 2 football fields. And I was like, wow, that's cool. And so I took a couple of pictures of that. And then there's like a plateau across from that further up. And I was like, oh, interesting. So I started to do some vocals to see if I could see if there was an echo. I couldn't draw an echo. And I was like, why is it not echoing here? Because you would think that from where I was standing that there should have been an echo going on. I don't remember an echo. So I was like, okay. So we turned around, and as we turned, there was a couple of branches that were laid out like a V. And I've seen these V's before. I know what they mean now. I didn't know what they meant then, but I have seen them all over the place. Whenever you go bigfooting, you usually find these branches, and they come to a V. And I'll explain what that is later on. But in fact, I have a video that talks about it. So I followed these things, and it led me up into this kind of a mound area, part of the finger. And we started walking up onto it, and we come across these, like a pair of trees, and they were snapped. And the branches that were snapped were about the same height from each other, and they're both facing the same direction. One tree had 2 branches that were broken. The other tree had 1 branch that was broken. But they were all facing the same direction, and they were about the same thickness, and they were about the same height. And I thought that was really bizarre, because if that was snow load, that would be really strange. And I couldn't determine why those branches were broken. I don't remember if that was a pine tree or a deciduous tree, but the branches were down on that. And I was like, oh, that's weird. So we kept looking around, and I kept finding more weird things. Like I found an area that almost looked like a nest, the way it was laid out, like almost like a little hidden away nest area. Took pictures of that. I found another one of those not too far from that too. And I was like, well, that's strange. And those weird hunting blind things, I found 3 of those, and I photographed one to really get a good look at it. So we eventually walked back out, and I was like, you know what, we need to go back. I want to tell this to Mike. And he said, okay. So we hiked all the way back to the campsite, walked in, told Mike all about it. And he said, hey, we need to go again. We need to go for another hike. And I was like, okay. So let me grab another chip and a battery. And he said, okay. So I grabbed this stuff, and Dave Otke's grandson said, I don't want to go. I said, all right. So it was me, Mike, Zach, Trenton. Me, Mike, Zach, and Trenton. I want to say there was one more, but I don't know who the other person was. And we went out for a hike. And we got past where he said that this is where the ice shrine was. We went down. I showed him where the first campsite was, and he goes, oh, this is cool. And I said, hold on and wait till you see the next one. And I showed him the next one. He was like, oh, I like this campsite. And he said, this would be great for a SUR event. And I said, yeah, it would. This is a really cool spot. And it's really secluded. So one way in, one way out for this campsite. So we went, I said, this is the trail. So we started walking it. and everybody got ahead of me. Now I was taking pictures of other things, and I hear a sound. Now the ground is like the trailhead's like this, and the ground goes up, and it starts to go higher. It goes up about 20 feet in elevation, and it plateaus. And I can see trees all up inside there. And one of the trees was flowering. I want to say it was probably like a crab tree of some sort, but it had like light pink flowers on it. And I was watching the branch doing this number, and I was like, what in the heck is causing that? And so I start to scramble up that hill to see what that is. And just as I'm getting close to that plateau, I hear, rah! And this, whatever it is, the branch goes back up like violently high, and I hear the like 2 feet hit, and it just starts running, and I'm like, what? And so as I'm coming up, I see the branch doing this number, and whatever's hitting those trees was the trees were doing this. I was like, oh crap. So I go running back down. I hit that trail, and I'm trying to keep up with that. No, that's never going to happen. You're not going to catch whatever this thing is running. So I'm hearing it, boom, 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 boom. I'm like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. So I'm getting to a point, I don't hear that running no more, and I come right out to where Mike and everybody's at. And they're looking at me. I said, did you guys see it? And they said, see what? I said, what do you mean, see what? Did it run past her? Because this guy was hauling. And they're like, what are you talking about? I was like, I saw a tree branch. It was doing this number. And something, as I was coming up to see what it was, I heard this raw. And it hits the ground. And it just takes off running. And he was like, no, nothing came out this way. I said, it would have come right through here. And he was like, everybody just looked at me and said, no, there was nothing here. And I'm like, oh. So I said, where are we going? He goes, we're going to go down to the ravine. I said, okay. So we start walking down into the ravine. We go all the way down. And we're seeing looked like a dirt bike had gone down about 20 or 30 feet, turned, and got back out of there like something spooked it. Like it didn't want him there. So as we're walking down, it's like you have all these heavy, thick trees over here to our right. And then we're up on a trail that's going down. And then you have trees that go into this big old valley. And as we get down, there is an access road to our left. So when we get down, we're like, what's that all about? So I said, Mike, is this BLM? And he goes, I don't know if this is BLM or not. I was like, this is weird. And so we get down into this valley. There's trees, and it's all thick old wood to our right. It's thick old wood to our left. In front of us, there's a trail that goes across. There's a creek that runs right past us. There's a trail that goes all the way up across to this mountain on this other side, or a small hill or whatever it is. And I was looking up at it going, oh, I'd like to climb that sometime. So we started roaming around, and we were like really paying attention to everything around us. I was taking pictures of everything, but we came across this down tree, and this tree, usually a root ball will sit up. You'll see the big round part of that root ball, right? Well, the roots on this root ball made a circle, and it was sitting like this. So we could walk up, and we all looked down inside. It was about a 5-foot depth by maybe 4 feet wide. It was crazy. And all the roots were like, looked like they had been wrapped in such a way that it made a perfect bowl. It was strange, really strange. And we looked at this thing, and I was like, this is weird. So then we started walking past that, and I noticed that there was all these holes. They're all about this big all over the ground. And as we were walking on it, the ground was like filled full of leaves and pine needles. So I figured there was probably ground squirrels that had a big city or something we were walking on. And we wandered around, came all the way back around through, and we were walking by more trees that are over here. We're coming back around, and we all walked past this one spot, and we got to a point. Trenton's looking at all these raspberries that are there. There's like a big long bush of raspberries, and they're all pretty thick. They're all about like that thick. They were pretty beefy. And he was like, can we eat these? And Mike said, we could, but I want to pose a question. The question is, why aren't these raspberries, or why do you eat raspberries? And we said squirrels, deer, rabbits, elk, moose, cattle, people, mountain goats, mountain sheep. birds, squirrels, whatever. And he said, right. And he said, so the question is, why isn't there a debris field on the ground? And we all looked at the ground, and there wasn't one raspberry sitting on the ground. We couldn't find one raspberry anywhere outside of that what was growing. I was like, that's weird. And he said, yeah. So I got back with my camera, and I'm getting ready to take a picture. Zach stands right in front of me. I said, Zach, you got to move. He goes, why? I said, I'm trying to take a photograph of Mike and Trenton. I said, this is like something great for him. Be a nice, a nice photograph. Okay. So he walks to my right. I get this. I'm getting ready to take like a couple of photographs of him, and I don't really pay attention really what's in the picture, but the camera is fixating on. I'm focusing on Mike and Trenton, and the camera's going to the trees behind Trenton. I'm like, I don't care about the trees behind Trenton. I go back and I'm trying to get the camera to adjust to Mike and Trenton. What I didn't realize that the camera already focused in on Mike and Trenton, but it was focusing on something behind Trenton in the trees. And I didn't click on this. I wasn't thinking about that. So Mike's got a bone. He said there's teeth marks in it. He's taking a picture of the bone. Trenton finally goes down and he ends up picking up a handful of raspberries, and he hands like one to his dad, and he's like, oh, thanks, son. And he's eating it. He walks over and gives one to Zach, and he walks up to me and goes, here. And I said, this isn't our food. He goes, what do you mean? I said, it's not our food. We didn't grow it. It's not our food. He goes, it's okay. Take it. It's peer pressure from a kid. So I was like, okay, fine. So I eat the stupid thing. I didn't want to eat this thing. I really didn't want to. So we ended up hiking all the way back. We got all the way back to the campsite, and Robin Roberts and John Roberts show up, and I see John at our campsite, and people are beginning to kind of wean out. They're starting to go home, and I drive back. I eventually grab my keys, and I'm getting ready to leave. I want to say that Tony was there, but I don't remember who was all there because I don't have photographs of everybody. So I know I wanted to take this road out one direction because it looked interesting for an interesting drive. But again, I don't know which way I should be going. So eventually I drive out and I run into Robin and her dog. And she said, we're hiking back to the campsite. And I said, I'll give you a ride. So I turned around and drove them back, dropped them off, took a photograph of them and Dave Odke and his grandson and Mike, and I saw Jim. And I ended up packing up my stuff and I left and I drove back to Denver. It took about, I want to say almost 5.5 hours to get home. Once I was like reviewing the video, or I was reviewing all my pictures, I come to this one picture. And this one picture has Mike, Trenton, and I'm paying attention because I remembered that the camera was focusing on something behind Trenton. And once I started looking at it, I was like, holy crap! And I was like, oh my God. I freaked out. I immediately called or texted Mike and said, hey, dude. He goes, what's going on? And I said, hey, are you home? He goes, yes. And I said, I photographed a Sasquatch. And he goes, no, you didn't. I said, Mike, I'm telling you I did. I photographed a Bigfoot. And he goes, no. Patrick, it's nice that you want to be part of SIR, but you don't have to make up stories. I said, Mike, I'm telling you, you got to look at this picture. He goes, Patrick, I said, Mike, I'm telling you, I'm not lying to you. I photographed something, and my camera was picking up on it, and I disregarded it. He goes, where was this at? This was down in that valley where you, me, and Trenton and Zach were at. And he goes, okay, send it to me. Send it to me by email. I said, okay. So I shot this picture to him by email. Mike didn't get back to me. And I was like, what are you doing? An hour goes by. I'm like, so I text Mike, what are you doing? Are you looking at that picture? And he goes, oh, dude, I forgot. I went downstairs and made a sandwich. I was like, what? So he goes back up and he looks at it. It took him all about 10 seconds. And he shot me a picture back. And he said, you see this? And I said, that's what I'm talking about. And he goes, there's something over by that log too. He said, we have to go back. And I said, okay, when do you want to do it? And he said, next week. I said, okay. My name is Patrick. This is Sasquatch in the Wild. And I hope you're enjoying the journey. I'll talk to you later.